Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation and ascension guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. There's been a lot of talk. This actually started on Monday in the other podcast that I do with my friend Sarah Evagnoni, Ascended World. So if you haven't seen that, you can go check that out. We have a page on that. But we talked about empathy. We talked about where it really comes from, what it comes from, how to manage it, like higher level stuff on how to see it, and then we got to talking about stripping away the layers of ego based values, right, to get to what we call sort of the heart of hearts, right, the core of our heart. So what I was getting this morning is it's really important to start talking about this in terms of we have more and more talk, especially as we get more and more awakened and remember more, that we feel this desire and this pull to do what we call fulfill our life's purpose, right? And we have these grand schemes as to what that is, and we know we came here to fill some big shoes of our own that we set out for ourselves. And we're still allowing that to come to realization. So that tends to be where we get sort of tripped up, because I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to and worked with who are like, well, I would like to make sure that I fulfill my life's purpose and what I came here to do. And, and then it's like, but I don't even know where to start. I don't know what it is and all this kind of stuff. And that's come up a lot lately. And so that's why it's important for us to revert back to that conversation about empathy, about putting our value based on others' expectations, making ourselves happy based on the expectation that somebody thinks we're a good person. So then we do these things that make us feel good about ourselves. So that's the real key, because we have so much of that interrelated and interlaced. Things like, okay, well, I've been told, right? How about this? This is a real big one. One of the most common ones. Oh, well, ever since I was a kid, I was told to be a good person. And depending on who I am, depending on my family, depending on my culture, depending on my environment, will depend on what that good person means, right? And culture tells you, religion tells you, families tell you what being a good person means. So then good morning, Laurel. Then we mistake. Then what happens is the ego then, I don't want to say mistake. The ego then replaces what the heart knows is its desire to realize and embody with what other people and culture and religion and society and all kind of stuff tells us should make us feel good about ourselves. And this is where we have come to this crisis of consciousness in terms of this grand awakening. And over the past, say, 10 years especially, I've talked to so many people who, they are doing one thing, they achieved a life that they thought was supposed to be the right life, right, to make them a good person. There are people I know who they do these tremendously incredible things and beautiful from a place of love, and yet feels deficient within themselves because most of their motivation comes from, oh, well, I'm doing this so that other people believe that I'm good, right? So that I can be a good person. And so we've lost the bottom and the meaning out of a lot of that stuff. So the more we talk about fulfilling our life's purpose, the more then we have this friction with the ego and the higher self saying, well, the ego says, well, this is what our life's purpose is. And the higher self says, yeah, no, that's not what our purpose is. And then these things they rub against each other and they start to fray and things start to fall apart. And then we have these intermediary steps. We're like, okay, well, I'm going to get away from that to do this. But then a lot of times that's also masked. So this is what I'm talking about, these layers of the heart, and getting back down to finding the core, what I'm calling the heart of hearts within us, of really what is that expresses our divinity in the individuality that we're here. So when we can express love, right? When we allow ourselves to infuse that in whatever we choose, then no matter what we turn our attention to will be a divine fulfillment. Okay. And that's the hard thing that we sort of have this thing like, oh, well, like my life's purpose is to, help others heal. But that's actually an externalization and an ego-based thing, because then it's like the realization is that everybody heals themselves. Nobody heals anybody else, right? It's coming to a place of helping others to realize that within themselves. And I love doing that. Honestly, I love doing that. That's really what my whole thing is. But it's also realizing that I do have that within me, right? That all that power is there innately to me, and to be able to express that is a really big thing. So the thing is, we come into this in awakening and consciousness, and then we start to change what is the core of what allows us to live our happiness, right? So the first steps are the most challenging, because that's where you get the most friction. So for example, before I was even aware of this, right, I had in my life believed when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, the thing was, okay, to grow up and as a woman to break the glass ceiling, because back then that was still a big topic, right? Still is today, not as much as it was back then, but it was like, break the glass ceiling. You can have it all. You can be married, have 2 kids, 2.5 kids, the picket fence and the dogs, and in my case, the cats and everything, and as well. And that is the way to be happy. Well, we had a lot of that embedded, right? So I grew up and created that. I did everything in my power to do that. And I did actually made a great creation of that. And there was something inside of me that was still a hole of deficiency, of something that I was holding back from myself. And that's when I decided. So after being in corporate for 17 years, I literally woke up one day and the voice was like, get out, it's time to go. And, the ego's going, what? Look at this amazing living and this amazing life you have created in doing this. And I've talked about this in other contexts in these podcasts. But this was a really big thing, because it was like, oh, well, and I had so much. Well, what do I want to do then? If I don't do this, then what would I do? Because I had spent so much of my life building toward what I believed was supposed to be that picture perfect life, right? That would make me happy, because that's what everybody else said would make you happy. That's what marketing says would make you happy. Commercials and religion, right? And whatever. Culture and people. Oh, well, a woman can't be happy without being married and having kids, right? That's what society said for so long, and still does to some degree, not as much. We're making progress. But anyway, and the same thing, for men in different ways. So, like with men, it's like, oh, well, be a good provider. You got to have a family and da, da, da. And so that's the stuff like culturally that we've accepted. So then we think that's my heart's desire. But really that's my ego's desire, because it's my ego's desire to fulfill what other people tell me make me a good person, so that they believe I'm a good person and that I deserve to be happy, so that I can convince myself to be happy from the outside in. And as we come to awakening and remembrance, it's the shifting to say, no, nothing makes me happy. I simply express my joy and love and bliss. And then what that looks like can be completely individual to me. And we're seeing that more and more. We're seeing all kinds of situations. We see more people who've decided not to get married, not to have children, not to have the picket fence and the whatever. And that's all good. It's awesome. I've had people come in to see me in sessions that are having a massive life crisis, because there was one person, like right off the bat. She came in and has had this amazing adult life, right? And she's pretty close to me in age, and I'm 51. So it's like, okay, so pretty close to me in age, and she had this amazing adult life so far, and she lived out in San Francisco, and she really had the beat on the street kind of experience. She had some really tough ones, some really raw experiences, but she had done what her heart had guided her to do. And then, yeah, so she fell into some things that were not savory. She came back. She bounced back from that, and she created a whole new life, then moved back to the East Coast. But the thing was this. She comes to me, and she's like, well, here I am. This was a while back. So it was like, yeah, here I am in my mid-40s, and I'm just figuring out, like, what to do now with my life. And I'm like, well, what have you been doing, right? And then she goes, yeah. And then I said, well, what do you want to do? What do you want? She goes, well, I've always just felt like I'm like this loser because my sister she's some kind of doctor, and she's got the perfect husband, and she's got the perfect kids, and the picket fence, and everything else, and everybody loves her. And I said, and how is that related to you in any way, shape, or form? And we had to do a lot of work on that because she felt like she wasn't couldn't even light a candle to her sister because her sister had that life, right? And that's what the happy adult life is supposed to be. And I'm like, well, have you been happy? And she's like, well, yeah, I've had some crazy awesome times. I'm like, okay. And it's been passionate and everything else. And I'm like, so why is that wrong? Why is that bad? We have decided as a culture and a society and families and whatever that what's good and what's bad and what should make you happy, what makes you a good person and all that kind of stuff. And we strive to have the ego strives to have others, accept us as good, as worthy, right? Valuable in society in the way the society expects them to be. And so we have so many layers built in our hearts over the core of our heart we have these layers that are all ego-based layers and veils that say, okay, well, we want to do this. This is what my heart's desire is because this is what will make me happy and then underneath that is because that's what I was told, right? And so we have a lot of that friction going on. The biggest step is the first one. When I left corporate, that was huge. That was so not me up to that point in my life. That was truly a loud calling from my higher self. And I'm really grateful that I listened because I didn't have any huge crisis at the time. It was, I didn't have any crisis that forced me to do it. So I didn't get laid off or fired. I had a great job, I had a great paycheck. I had great, all massively, great position and title and all that kind of stuff. Great life. And then it was just like, yeah, get out. I didn't get sick. I didn't get into an accident. In fact, I had already, when I got the voice to get out, I had already licked, I did have a lot of stress and I did get a lot of migraines and stuff like that, but I had already licked that and gone into alternative health and holistic health to change my whole physiology and change the way I dealt with stuff, so that I could deal with them better. So by the time I left, I actually had gotten through all that. So it wasn't even because of that. It was literally because the voice said it's time to go. And then I was like, well, if I go, what do I do? And I think part of it was interesting. I was so tied, I think back and I think I was so tied to what I had to do for so long to survive that I was like, yeah, no, it's time for me to thrive. It's time for me to remember who I am, to get to the core of my heart. And it took me a while, right? So I left. I did this funny several years I created this huge organic herb nursery, and I had a great time with that. Not the most profitable thing, but in fact, it was a money pit, but it was an incredible experience. And it helped me to start learning myself again. It gave me the space. And then, I had another business doing marketing, which is what I had done in corporate. And then I came into this. And I had the biggest hesitation coming into this because I was like, well, what tangible thing comes from this? And it's woo-woo, and what are people going to think? I mean, this is all the kind of stuff. And, I can't make a living doing this, and da-da-da-da, all that kind of stuff. And I had at least gotten to the point of consciousness at that point to trust. Because I was like, okay, well, so far so good. Haven't killed myself yet doing all this stuff. And so I started, and that was I started doing this in 2011, and it just keeps on expanding. And now, because I let myself say, okay, what I really love exploring the power that comes within. I love exploring consciousness and seeing through the veils of multi-dimensions. I love I love seeing the biggest picture and being able to see how it all fits together in this beautifully constructed jigsaw puzzle that we created. And that's how I see it. That's how I see what I do and how I exist. And that every day is another piece that I remember. And then it shifts and changes. And so, the first step was, yeah, absolutely, I want to work with people to do this, right? And help them realize, but always with the intention of helping them to realize that they are the ones that shift stuff within themselves. And it's not me healing them. I'm just helping them access stuff they haven't yet remembered how to access. And then I'm really willing to teach them how to do it. Because, by the way, the more of us who do this, the better, because then that shifts our entire consciousness to a much different place of listening to our heart, right? So anyway, it was a big jump for me. So I don't really, I talk about it, but I don't talk about, I talk about it, but I don't identify with it. It was just an experience, but it was a great experience. And it's a great example. And the thing is that I've been doing this now full time for 9 years, right? And in 9 years, it has changed dramatically from where I started to where I am today and to where I'm going, because it's continually shifting, because I allow myself to open my heart and say, what's more of this? Not what's next necessarily. It's like, what's now and what's more? What's more of my heart? What's more of my core? And it doesn't have to be in the same direction. So what happens is, as we awaken to this and we commit ourselves to listening to that heart's desire, that heart's passion, that the embodiment of that purpose, which is living that bliss and passion, right? It's often we put stuff in our paths that help us to align. So this is like this sort of next step. And it took me half of this to get there, but the next step is realizing that it's not just one thing. Okay, this purpose that we talk about so much, because I think that, by the way, tends to be an egoic thing, right? Like above all else, right? I don't know. I have to look at that. But we look at this purpose thing as this one big thing, right? And I was talking to somebody about this the other day, I don't know, last week or something like that, when we're talking about how someone's heart's desires don't all have to be, we don't have to start with that big thing, right? And part of the process is to start allowing ourselves the openings, right? And putting aside all those layers from the ego to say, you know what? I'm going to do this because I feel myself the most when I do this. I feel natural when I do this. I'm not putting on an act. I'm not being somebody so that somebody likes me. I'm not being somebody so that I'm, admired. I'm doing this because I don't care if nobody ever notices that I do it or whatever. I do it because it is an expression of my joy. So that's where I start with Minnie. I always say, you know what? When somebody comes into sessions with me, I say, so what brings you joy? What allows you to express your joy? And I can't tell you how many people over the years have said to me, I don't know. And so when I say that, some people say, oh, that's sad. It's like, no, it's not sad. It's that's where we've gotten to. Oh, here's a yawn. Excuse me. That's where we've gotten to in terms of our the layers, as many layers, is because we're so burdened down with all these blankets, right, of other people's blankets that are saying, yeah, this is what you should be, this is what you have to do, and these are tied into expectations. And what, okay, so to be a good wife, to be a good husband, you should be like this, and you should do this, and you should tend to your spouse, and you should do this. To be a good parent, to be a good mother, to be a good father, you have to do this. And then all of that is external validations. To be a good coworker, to be a good, business person, to be a good whatever, you have to do this. It has to look like this. Anytime we say we have to, or you can't, or whatever, that's all ego-based. It's all based on separation, right? When you say, okay, and I can do this, it's the but versus the and. The but is ego, the and is inclusive, right? And say, okay, so if I allow myself to be my heart, to be my passion, to be my bliss, which is really my divine core, and my natural state, by the way, what would that look like? Right? Does it look like taking a walk in nature? Does it look like painting or writing? Does it look like creating something? Does it look like, I don't know, cooking? Like, there's so many different things. And a lot of these things are actually what we would call artistic, right? And non-linear things. But that's not even always the case, because some people just love doing things like programming, or they love like creating through, putting these things together and putting together, how something works and getting to the nitty gritty of it. And that's all cool too. And that's part of, the architecture of the creation of the earth and the earth dimensions. So what we lose sight of is this. We then get lost and we get overwhelmed and say, well, I don't know how to get to that purpose. But if you allow yourself these little things, okay, when we start going within and committing ourselves to being, the core of ourselves, to being the heart of our hearts, to listening to the heart of our hearts, underneath all of those layers, right? And we say, okay, I'm going to allow myself, I'm worthy to do this, I'm worthy to be this without having to do anything. And when I be this and I listen to it, this is what I'm guided or compelled to do, right? So, for example, I was talking to somebody the other day about that, and they were talking, and I said, well, so, and it had to do with in the context of being with others of like heart, others, like visiting with others of like heart. And then there was like, so here's the thing, so we get into marriages and relationships, and it's like, oh, I'm supposed to spend the primary part of my time with my spouse, or I'm supposed to spend this percentage of my time with my kids, and I might have a little tiny time to be with these other people, right? And so what happens when you come to a place when in your heart you're like, okay, I'm realizing who I am, and to do that, I really love being around others who are of that like heart and are of that like vibration. And it's not that your family isn't, maybe they are, maybe they're not, but that's inclusive. It's not exclusive. It's not saying, well, I want to just be with these people and not those people. It's saying, I embrace being with all who are that way, because we will have equally as loving and fun and expansive experiences by being together, by being connected, or whatever. So when we do that, guess what? That's something that my heart is like, so I do that. That's part of my intention. And so that's part of my heart's desire. Why? Is because then I get to be me, as me, authentically me, without having to change or not feeling like there's any pressure, which I know is ego, and whether I accept it or not, whatever, without having any pressure, like just being natural. It's so interesting because it is our natural state, and we don't realize how much energy we put into not being our natural state. But so much energy being like these boxes of expectations and what things are supposed to look like in the 3D. And we do so much about what am I not supposed to do? What am I supposed to look like? What is this supposed to be? What's not supposed to be? All that kind of stuff. That we're like, so it just, when we are allowed to be who we are, what we are in that pure state, then it's so easy. And that's what we then convince ourselves is not good enough, because it can't be good unless it's hard, right? We can't be like, how many sayings are out there about overcoming obstacles and suffering and everything else to, be that martyr and be, the exalted, whatever. And it's like, no, actually, it's sort of the opposite. I think we really sort of live in an opposite world. I think this part of our consciousness has created an opposite world. And part of the game is for us to remember that, because really, it's so much easier to really be who we are. And when we feel like I don't have to dress up, I don't have to look like this, I don't have to act like this, I can be this way, and I choose to be this way. And by the way, it's not in taking it away from anybody. It's not with any exclusion. It's just saying, I am this way and I accept myself this way and I love myself this way, truly. and I commit myself to coming and being that I can be this way, then it's easy to come from a place of love. It's easy coming from a place not only of love, but of being committed to my authenticity, right? Without sacrifice. So there's a really fine line there too, because many times that's perceived as what happens is, and when we get really consciously spiritual, then we have this perception again by the ego of, oh, well, if you're spiritual, you have to be a doormat, right? You have to be nice to everybody. You have to love everybody all the time. And that's still ego, by the way. Have to. And I've written about this and talked about this, where it's so funny that, like, in fact, I find myself more authentically powerful and strong on where I'm coming from on something because I am spiritual, because I am acknowledging my authentic self. And yeah, I can agree to disagree with people, and that's cool. Because this is my truth and your truth is yours, and that's all right. But when I do that, it's really so much easier than engaging in arrow fighting, battles and all that kind of stuff. And I see that happening a lot. Right now, we have so much going on because the politics are picking up in the United States, right? And I saw this wonderful article this morning, a wonderful article that was talking about if the Democratic candidate picks like this amazing cabinet that is not just really progressive, but also, more moderate, right? More towards the middle of the road, a little more conservative, whatever, to hold hands so that we can work together again, then we would kill it, right? And that's the case. No matter what we do, it's coming together from this place of similarity, saying, okay, look, when I honor myself and authenticity, then all I can do is honor you and yours. Because I'm not looking to you to take anything away from me, and I'm not looking to take anything away from you, except this is my reality. This is my truth. This is what I desire. This is what I am creating. And either you are a part of that or not, and that's cool, right? So there's all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff is going on. We have so many things like that. So the commitment is truly to be able to listen to our heart of hearts. And here's the other thing. Oh, but I went off sort of on a tangent because of this whole political thing I keep on saying. Anyway, what I started saying is this. Like, being around others, like, of the same kind of vibration, the same kind of heart or whatever, is great. And of course, it's great to be around all kinds because it's just honoring everybody's journey. But in whatever space it is that nurtures us to allow ourselves our fierce authenticity and our true heart and our true existence, right, as the divine, that is the easiest place for us to be. That's where we feel great and relaxed and happy and just blissful, and everything just connects and it's effortless. So, and when we're in that space, guess what? Then we get into the practice and habit. So the more we do our things in the 3D that align with those vibrations within us. So whether it's being with people of like heart, whether it's doing those little things, even if it's not what you do for a living, okay? Though it's great to do it for a living, which is part of what we sort of promote, because ultimately we can do that. It doesn't matter, because that might not be what you're meant to do, right? So it could be just exploring, okay, I love nature. I love this. I love the interconnectedness of this. I love exploring this. I love creating art. I love, whatever, right? Exploring it and allowing yourselves in little pieces to explore it. Because the more you give yourself permission to do that, the more it all starts to add up. Okay, so I do it here in this part of my life, and I do it here in this part of my life, and I do it here in this part of my life. And the more you start doing it, the more it starts to weigh more toward you living in that authenticity versus living in those layers of expectations. Okay, and I don't even say expectations. Living in those, well, it's because it's self-expectations, right? Living in those layers of external valuation and validation, because then it's and by the way, and then the more we do that, the more easy it becomes for us to just throw those blankets off, to throw those layers off and say, this is really what my heart of hearts is. This is really what my passion is. So it's usually not one step. And by the way, I'm still exploring and embodying mine more and more. And part of it has gotten to do with getting out of your own way, right? You get out of your own way with fears, things of like, oh, well, what if this doesn't happen? What if I do this and da da? And that's all expectations. And so that's all the self work that we do along the way while we're allowing ourselves these other steps. And I found, like, in the 9 years I've been doing this work, which I love and I'm passionate about, right? It continues to evolve because I let it. And the key that I keep on getting by guidance is, and also be willing to let go of the things that don't serve you anymore, that don't serve that vibration anymore, that you were maybe doing these little things saying, oh, well, I feel like I should do this, instead of, how about I just do all of this and embrace it all as this amazing part of me, like this amazing expression of me and who I and what I came here to be, right? And the more we align all the parts of our lives. So I love martial arts. I do martial arts. I love, like I love nature. It's like we do all these different things and we can explore all these different things. And it's great to have all these varied like ways of expressing and exploring our passion, right? Then we give ourselves the permission, saying, well, if I give myself the permission to do all this other stuff, I might as well do the rest of it. And it's when we're aligned in those vibrations that we allow ourselves to really realize what that purpose is. And really, at the end of the day, my feeling is, my suspicion is that our true purpose has to do with being that full expression of our divine being, like really, so that we can hold the vibration of unconditional love, which in itself changes the vibration of everything around us and everyone around us, like helps others give permissions to themselves to do that. And then we all have a completely different world. So simple as that. But things to think about. These are really important. Look in your life this week about and look at the things that you believe are your purpose, right? That you talk and then use that you might use as a shield to say, oh, well, this is my purpose. And look at that and really say, okay, is this truly what I feel like, because I feel like as long as we're here, we're continually evolving that realization. And to say, okay, so am I allowing this? Am I allowing myself to express that and explore those passions throughout my life and throughout my experience? Or am I squashing it? Am I I'm seeing the picture. I can't think of the word in my head. Am I blotting it out? I can't, that's not the word, but it'll do. Because I don't believe I believe I'm supposed to be doing something else. Right. And by the way, once we start to align in those little pieces, guess what? The other stuff that we do in the 3D become effortless. Right. So people go, oh, well, I don't want to go food shopping anymore. I'm like, oh, well, or you just can get to the place where it's like, oh, well, I love doing this. And okay, if I love to do this, and I do still need to eat. And okay, cool. Maybe I'll just have a great experience when I go food shopping, things like that. It changes our vibration about everything. So look in your life about the things and ask yourself, what do I allow myself to fulfill my heart's desire? Because, for I was talking about the person who was having a hard time, getting to the place of setting up, getting together with really high vibe friends that she loved. And it was fulfilling a heart's desire is, well, if I desire and really would love to be around people like that all the time, why am I not? Why don't I allow myself to be? Why don't I allow myself to be? And around people who are willing to shift their self into that place. And it's not that it's not judging people who are not there. It's just choosing what my reality is here. And by the way, then people get drawn to you who are ready to change that, and all. It's all this lovely domino effect. And it's not, as we were talking about in my Sunday World podcast with Sarah on Mondays, we talked a couple weeks about it's not just a ripple of dropping a water in the ocean and it all rippling out. It's actually just dropping that water in the ocean, and the entire ocean just changes like that. And that's what we can do. And that's really, to me, one of our bigger purposes. So start looking at that, little baby steps. What is it that you can add to your list of things that you allow yourself to do because of your heart's desire? And look at what you believe are your heart's desire and say, is it truly that, or do I feel like I'm a better person or a good person or a loved person because I do that? Because that is an egoic desire versus that higher heart desire. So baby steps. And we'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter signing out on this week's Living the Shift. Have a good one.